The first time I visited Kirkuk was really only a few hours. And it was a day in April 1991. And I remember driving through Kirkuk, and what I noticed was that there were bulldozers leveling an entire civilian neighborhood. In 2003, when I had the chance to go to Kirkuk for a crisis group, that image was always in my mind. And it wasn't to say, well, the Kurds are right, because I saw them being punished in 1991, but I understood that there was a serious issue there that needed to be addressed. The conflict in Kirkuk is really one between the Kurdish region and the rest of Iraq. Now, what helps the Iraqi state is that Kirkuk is a mixed city and is not a Kurdish one. It's a microcosm of Iraq because of the mosaic, the ethnic and religious mosaic, and the importance of oil in that mix. So all of this really came out into the open in 2003 and had the potential to turn violent, just as there were many other places in Iraq that were turning violent. So we had to find mechanisms for managing that. So I spent time in Kirkuk and discovered and built up a network there of contacts on all sides of the political divides, plural. And I discovered, even if people didn't make it explicit, that they were not themselves talking across the aisle. That if there was a problem, and there were many problems, the technocrats could maybe talk to each other, but the politicians could not. And I happened to be contacted by the head of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation office in Jordan, who was covering both Jordan and Iraq. And she said, we have some extra money. Can you suggest anything? And I said, well, it just so happens that I think that we could do something very healthy and useful in Kirkuk, because we have a situation there where people are diametrically opposed to each other, but they have no way of resolving their conflicts because they don't talk to each other. So we can at least put them together in one room and see if that works. Iraq was not a nice place to be at this time, right? After 2003, it was chaos. It was dangerous. Anybody who stood out politically, and of course people were aspiring to be political because ambitious, whatever, power, they were targeted by Al-Qaeda, and other insurgents. And eventually there was also a sectarian conflict. This was all before 2007. So people were all desperate to get a break and to go out to Jordan for a few days just to breathe. Well, the condition was that you would sit then with your political enemies across the table. Well, there's always people willing to talk. And once you have a few, then others can't say no. Because they just don't want to be excluded.
هذه المنصة قبل 2008 ما كانت متاحة لمكونات كركوك أن تجلس على طاولة واحدة وتتحاور وتناقش المشاكل وإمكانية الوصول إلى حلول. وبالتالي أنا كانت عندي محادثة أعتبرها أشرت جانب مهم على أهمية مبادرات مجموعة الأزمات الدولية في تقريب وجهات النظر بين مكونات كركوك. فبالتالي هذا كان حافز كبير لنا أن نستمر في التواصل والحوار لحين الوصول إلى حلول مستدامة لمحافظة كركوك. فالفكرة إذن كيف بدأ الحوار وكيف كان مهما لأنه وفر لنا منصة للتحاور.
The first workshop wasn't unpleasant, but people were clearly hostile, not to us, but to each other. So that went on until we had some kind of agreed, very bland statement that everybody was willing to sign. And then we had dinner. And at dinner, suddenly the whole mood changed. This was not the first dinner, it was the second dinner. It was at the end of the workshop. They had signed, now they could relax. And they relaxed. And they started talking with each other, and they started joking with each other. It's like suddenly everything came loose, because they realized that, they might not have known each other personally, but they knew their relative. Because again, it's a small community. Kirkuk is not very large. So they all know of each other one way or another. And all these divisions that are politically created, they fell away for the duration of the dinner, allowing them to be as spontaneous as they could. And it was the basis for then the continuation of the exercise. People were very keen to come after that.
مما تعلمته في علم المنطق أن أي خلاف بين شخصين في حال الجلوس على طاولة واحدة والحديث على هذه المشاكل يخلق نوع من الأرضية المشتركة بين الأطراف، وبالتالي هذه الحوارات أثمرت في أن تكون هناك مشتركات بين محافظة كركوك، وبالتالي أسهم في حلحلة كثير من الأمور. أنا لا أقول أن مشاكلنا في كركوك انتهت بعقد هذه الجلسات والحوارات، ولكنها أسهمت على أقل تقدير مثلا في أن يتشكل فريق عمل من كل المكونات قادر على الاجتماع وقادر على التواصل وقادر على مناقشة حتى المختلف عليه في محافظة كركوك. هذا من جانب. من جانب آخر، هذه المشتركات التي تولدت أسهمت في أن يتبنى مكونات مجلس محافظة كركوك جوانب خدمية وخلق وجهة نظر مشتركة حوله.
All of Iraq was engulfed in violent conflict except the Kurdish region and Kirkuk. Kirkuk didn't see the violence that any of the other places saw that had mixed populations like Tel Afar, for example, or Baghdad in particular. And I think it is because in the end, the people in Kirkuk, the politicians in particular, and the society managed to discuss these issues well ahead of things coming really to a climax, and were able to quiet things down and to say, listen, these are legitimate questions about the status of Kirkuk and this and that, but we can postpone them. We don't need to solve them now, as long as nobody takes steps that would preempt a particular solution to the status of Kirkuk.
اقتنعنا أنه أهمية الشراكة، اقتنعنا أنه هذه كركوك مدينة متنوعة، وبالتالي يجب أن تدار فيها الإدارة والمحافظة بشكل يشترك فيه الجميع. وأيضا ربما الإرث الحضاري، ربما هذه الحوارات لمكونات كركوك عصم كركوك من أن تتوجه للدم لحل هذه النزاعات مثل ما حصل العنف الطائفي أو القومي في مناطق أخرى من العراق. لا أقول لم تحدث مشاكل أمنية، وبعضها كان كبير جدا، ولكن على الأقل مستوى العنف مقارنة مع مناطق وبؤر صراع أخرى كان أقل حدة في كركوك من المناطق الأخرى. هذه أمور مهمة.
And that is where we still are, and it works. No, nothing is resolved, but everything is managed in such a way that people can live. And that, I think, is a good lesson for conflict prevention, because conflict is endemic in societies. It can erupt, it can end, but sometimes it can only be managed because the solution is too divisive. And right now, any solution to the Kirkuk status would be divisive. And so, better to manage it.
وبالتالي ثمرة اللقاءات كان كبير جدا. أتمنى أنه هذه الحوارات وهذه المبادرات من الأزمات الدولية أو المنظمات الأخرى أن تبقى مستمر. أيضا لا ننسى اليوم احنا في كركوك عندنا حوارات حول محافظة كركوك يشترك فيها التركمان والعرب والكرد والمسيحيين، ولحسن حظنا أنه في كل فريق على الأقل شخص من التركمان والكرد والعرب والمسيحيين هم من المشاركين في حوارات 2008، وبالتالي هذا خلق لنا فرصة في التعامل الأمثل فيما بيننا لإيجاد حلول مستدامة حول قضية كركوك. حتى من نختلف بإيجابية، نختلف وهدفنا إيجاد صيغة ممكن أن نصل فيها إلى توافق بين المكونات.
impacts can be very intangible for an outsider to grasp, whereas locally the impact is huge, but you have to experience it. And I think in Kirkuk they did experience it. They did experience it because they had no major violence throughout this period of now 20 years, which is remarkable given, again, the ethnic makeup and the presence of oil and the very serious disputes between the Kurdish government and the federal government over the status of Kirkuk. It is remarkable. And the community has held together as a single community. People find this the most valuable thing on earth, plus their own safety, of course, has come together. So can I show that to anyone? Come spend some time in Kirkuk and see for yourselves how people have experienced this, and talk to anyone there. And they will say that, in fact, for them, life is, can always be better, and the economy is not great. And there are many issues between Kirkuk and the central government, unhappiness about this or that. There's always the concern that this overall conflict over the status of Kirkuk will fight itself out at some point. But by and large, things are okay. And, that is a great example of impact.